couple of bikes that you'll also see a lot of online for sale, whether it's eBay or Craigslist, typically locally because they're hard to ship. Private parties typically won't want to ship bikes. They want you to come pick them up. Used fitness equipment companies will typically send their bikes anywhere on the planet if you write them a check or PayPal them money. But the Le Mans Revmaster, which is the yellow bike, and the original Star Trek V bike, those bikes tend to be cheap in cost and high on wear and tear. The thing that identifies a Le Mans Revmaster, which is the yellow bike, a used Le Mans Revmaster, or the first generation Star Trek V bike, which is the bike Star Trek made to compete with Johnny G, is that they don't use perimeter weighted flywheels. And what that means is when Johnny G created spinning, the thing that he came up with to simulate the feel of his bicycle was a perimeter weighted flywheel driven by a chain. Use a chain drive, it feels like your bicycle. You use a perimeter weighted flywheel with a fixed gear with all the weight on the outside edge of the bike. You start pedaling the bike, you get the aggressive inertia. It feels like you're being pulled by a freight train, and you stay on the bike. You develop a beautiful pedal stroke instead of this kind of a thing. The Le Mans Revmaster didn't have it then, it doesn't have it now. And the original Star Trek V bikes don't have that. There are tons of old V bikes for sale for $200, $300. And typically the thing that people gravitate towards when they're buying a used bike is price. When you buy a bike for your home, think about the next 5 to 10 years. Are you going to use that bike for the next 5 to 10 years? And if it's got a 90-day warranty, how does that reflect on a 5 to 10-year ownership period? An original spinner V-bike, original Star Trek V-bike, or one of the first or second generation Le Mans, which don't have the big square handle, where they just have dual handles that come up like so, those bikes will tend to cost an arm and a leg over time used if you buy it from the wrong source and the bike breaks down, because A, it's tough to find someone who can effectively repair it, and B, if they do repair it, you're going to get taxed big time on the repair, and they may or may not even do it effectively and correctly, but you still have a bill to pay, and you may be stuck with a bike that didn't work when you took it in. It works for a period when you get it back after you've paid a huge bill, and then it's back to failure mode, so you still have a bike that basically turns into a big shovel or a money pit that you won't want to ride. So buying your bike from used fitness equipment companies, buying them from private parties, it can be rewarding, but can also be hugely detrimental in terms of just the financial burden that a used piece of equipment can put on you. We typically sell refurbished bikes at StudioCycles.com. We call them certified pre-owned because we know the history of the bike, and before we resell it, we go through the bike and there's no nut, bolt, screw, bearing, chain, or part on that bike that's left unturned. And there are a lot of great bikes out there for sale, but typically Schwinn and Star Trek are the two bikes that are most popular. And the reason that they're the most popular is because people who buy, the bulk of people who buy used bikes for their homes, they're buying them because they've had a baby, their favorite instructor moved, they're tired of going to the gym, fighting traffic, driving, getting to the gym, and there's no bike to ride. So at some point, the decision-making process happens, I want a bike for my own house. And people tend to want bikes that they're familiar with at their gyms. And the Schwinns and the Star Treks are typically the bikes that most gyms use. It's typically a bike that most people have cut their teeth on and gotten that addiction to the whole spinning, indoor cycling class, the feelings that the classes produce. I'm a junkie myself when it comes to the classes, and not so much the classes as just being on a bicycle or being on a spin bike, or an indoor cycle rather. One last thing about, one note that I'll close on, and that's people who decide to buy an indoor trainer for their bicycle. Typically when the decision-making process is happening and it's, God, that's a used bike, it doesn't look very good, or God, that's expensive, well, God, we got bicycles, let's buy a trainer at a bicycle shop and just put our bicycles on the trainers. If your bicycle has any intrinsic value, if it's worth some money, especially if it's a high-end road bike, and the indoor training companies will never tell you this, they'll just have magnetic trainers, fluid trainers, computer programs. You got 1,000 ways to slice and dice a machine that they hook up to your bicycle. But having spent 25 years in the bicycle industry and owning over 100 of the best bikes produced in the bicycle industry, I can tell you that there is no bicycle on the planet that's designed, particularly high-end bikes, to have the rear wheel clamped by the end of the rear triangle and having all that flex put on the rear triangle. Especially if you have a high-end bike that's carbon fiber, titanium, even an old screw and glue aluminum and carbon bike, when you clamp the back wheel by the axles and throw all that flex on it, it just wrecks the rear frame, the rear triangle of the frame. It ruins the rear hub. It puts flex on the spokes and the intersection of the spokes where the spokes support the hub and the wheel. And you won't feel spokes popping in the frame. It's just something that happens subtly every time you get on and clamp your bike to that trainer and start doing this. So if you're thinking indoor trainer to replace the getting a bike for your house like this, save your money, leave the trainer at the bike shop, preserve the life of your bicycle, and just save up a little more money and get yourself a good used bike. Check us out at studiocycles.com, or you can try me. You can send me an email with your questions. Leave me some information if you send me an email. What type of bike you're looking for? How many? Are you the principal, and will other people be using the bike? Do you take classes, and what type of bike you've gotten used to in the classes? Where you're located, what your budget is. My email address is spindoc111@gmail.com.